As we get older, we generally lose some flexibility, and as golfers, that typically means less motion, less range of motion, and less distance. I'm going to share with you some very practical tips that you can use the next time you go to the driving range, which will help you to increase your range of motion while moving your body in a very safe way that will actually increase your enjoyment of this game and also the amount of time that you can play it for. So there were some strong claims in that introduction, and I need to be able to show you how you can go to the driving range the next time you practice and incorporate some of these very simple modifications into your setup and your swing to help you not only get back the mobility and the flexibility that you think you've lost, but also get back the distance as well. I've chosen to use the driver for this video because I know that most of you are going to see any loss in distance that you're experiencing be most painful with this club. So let's see how much of this distance we can get you back with the driver, with the tips that I'm going to share with you today. And I'll also be wearing the Hack Motion wrist sensor to help understand how the wrists are really key here in providing back some of the speed that you've lost. The body isn't moving as well as it used to, but there's a lot of speed that you can get out of these wrists if you know how to incorporate that. And I'll be sharing a drill with you that really helps you to get the maximum speed out of the wrists as we progress through the video today. So how do we start? What can we do to help increase our mobility, flexibility, and ultimately give you back some of that lost distance? Well, I would start at setup, and I'd start down at the ground, meaning I would tell you to turn both of your feet out. This is a topic that doesn't get a lot of attention and in many cases is often discouraged. This movement is discouraged. A lot of people are told to turn their feet in, or especially the trail foot. I think there's a lot of instruction out there that thinks the trail foot should be turned in and you can turn the front foot out a little bit. I would strongly disagree, and I would disagree even more when it comes to people looking to maximize their range of motion, because foot flare is effectively internal, external hip rotation. It's presetting to some extent the amount of motion and range of motion that your pelvis has in the backswing. So it's important that you turn your feet out to give you that range of motion. You can try this right now. Stand up wherever you are, even if you don't have a golf club, and set up to a golf ball that would be on the ground, and just turn your feet in, have them straight, and make a backswing. And just notice what that feels like in the lower body, whether that's a nice easy movement to make or whether it's restrictive at all. And then immediately turn both of your feet out. Some 30 degrees is a good place to start, although I've had players with both feet turned out even more than that. But let's start with 20 to 30 degrees as a baseline, and then make that same backswing movement and just notice whether or not that movement changed at all. Did it feel easier or more difficult? In my experience, 100% of the time, people tell me that the second way of doing that is easier on their body. And that makes perfect sense to me because it conforms to how our bodies are built. We're utilizing our body's natural range of motion to increase our ability to turn more freely. So start by turning your feet out. That will help you tremendously. In fact, I've had players just turning their feet out increase their distance by 20 to 30 yards simply by making that one simple change. We didn't do anything else with the swing, just allowed them to turn their feet out, and they immediately got extra range of motion and all that distance came back immediately. So really, I can't encourage you enough to start by turning your feet out. Second thing I would do, still taking the setup into account here, and I take my trail leg, my right leg, well now it's flared out, I'm also going to pull it back. And the reason I'm going to pull it back is it's going to help to preset my hip turn slightly more closed than it would be if I had the stance square. And presetting a little bit of that closed nature of my hips increases the full range of motion that I have during the backswing, effectively allowing me to make a bigger turn. And in conjunction with that, at the very same time, I'm going to allow my right leg to straighten fully in the backswing. At the same time as I'm doing that, my left leg's going to flex slightly. The knees changing flex is another area of the swing that either doesn't get much attention, or if it does, you're often discouraged from changing knee flex. There's a school of thought out there that we're supposed to keep the trail leg bent and turn into it as if the golf swing, or the body for that matter, was a spring, some resistance model. We're really not built like that at all. If we were, someone would wind me up to the top and let go of me, I would naturally spring back to the ball, but I don't. There's no spring-like mechanism inside the body. So you must allow your knees to change flex. The knees are the gateway to a bigger shoulder turn. The knees are the key in terms of allowing the hips to turn fully and therefore the shoulders to turn fully. If you want to make a full backswing, you can modify your stance as I've described, and then make sure you allow your knees to change flex. That gives you a full hip turn and full shoulder turn. And that's going to make an enormous difference to your potential power, while at the same time making it easier on your body every time you swing. And with those setup modifications in place, if we switch to the front camera, I want to also describe and discuss how we want to avoid any unnecessary shifting through the shot. As you lose some mobility and flexibility, you also lose some agility. Your athleticism is reduced somewhat. So any movements that you make, unwanted movements you make throughout the swing, become much more difficult to recover from. What do I mean by that? Well, many of you will have found that you move off the ball, and in doing so have to get back to the ball in some way by the time you reach impact. As your agility reduces, your ability to do that in a small space of time that you have in the downswing isn't so good. So I'd highly encourage you, as you make these setup modifications that we described from this down the line view, and increasing that backswing using the knee flex change, that we're going to stay centered from this front view. There's no weight shift. Okay, I'm making a full turn of my hips and my shoulders without moving off the ball. That makes the golf swing simple, extremely simple and efficient, while once again at the same time doing so within the body's natural range of motion. You can make a much bigger turn without shifting off the ball, which makes the likelihood of you coming back and making solid contact much more likely. So we've made the setup adjustments, we've changed our knee flex in the backswing to allow full hip turn, full shoulder turn, and from this front view we're turning around a more forward fixed point where we just stay centered with no shift. Quick question for you. Did you know that 80% of your golf ball's direction comes from the club face angle at impact? And it's your wrists that control that angle. If you want to hit straighter shots and add more distance to your game, then check out the link in the description below. And that's got us to the top of the swing, where we now need to produce that power in the downswing. How do we benefit from that extra range of motion that we've already got now in the backswing? How do we get that from the top of the backswing into the ball? I mentioned at the start of this video, there's a tremendous amount of value in getting the speed out into the club head via the wrists, and that's not often spoken about. In fact, as you get older, you tend to find that the body's trying to take over too much. I'd share from this front view a view that I think a lot of senior golfers would struggle with, which is as they swing back, they feel like the hands, the club, the arms, and the body all move together, and then the same thing happens in the follow-through. This would be one of the slowest ways to swing with the least transfer of momentum out into the club head. What I'm going to suggest is, whilst we have our foot pulled back, which is a great way to start as I've already described, we're going to utilize the same drill into the downswing. So we've got our foot pulled back, and as we swing down towards the ball, I want you to try to keep that right foot, your trail foot, down on the ground and try to keep it straight, keep the leg straight, which will require you to allow the hands and arms and club head to swing past your body. That's getting the speed out into the club. That is not just turning your body and your club at the same speed, which is one of the slowest ways to do it. This is helping you to getting the transfer of that momentum out into the club head. You'd want to feel like you swing fast, but you will feel like that lower body is somewhat restricted. That's part of the idea here. We're trying to slow down the hips and get the speed to come out into the arms, the hands, and the club. So an exercise of practicing this would look like this, where you can get the fact there the microphone is picking up the speed that I'm getting through the ball. That's requiring a lot of wrist movement, and that's a good thing. As I say, you get a lot of speed out of the wrist. You get far more speed out of the wrists than you do out of the body. If I turned everything at the same speed, you won't hear the same swoosh at the bottom of the swing there. So this is how you'd practice it, and then you stand up and hit balls like this. So we've modified the stance, turned the feet out, pulled the trail foot back, and as we swing back, full hip turn and shoulder turn via the knee flex change. And now I'm going to hit this ball, keeping my right foot on the ground and keeping my right leg straight, and seeing how fast I can swing. You'll notice there's a little bit of a recoil there, which just shows that all of that energy got thrown out into the bottom of the swing. As I do this exercise, I generally find that my balls curve a little more from right to left than I would like, but what I'm really trying to train here is the speed, trying to get the speed out into the club head. And that club head speed there was 100 miles per hour. That was 100 miles per hour with the shortest, most restricted follow through you've probably ever seen. You'll be able to get more club head speed with a shorter swing than you will with what you currently use as your full swing. I'd strongly encourage you to work on this exercise, and you can do this away from the driving range. This particular piece here, if you don't have the time to get to the range, you can just grab a club in your house and turn it upside down and do the same setup modifications that I've described today, and practice trying to make the grip end of the club make the most sound at the bottom of the swing. You want to hear the swoosh, the cracking of the whip, if you will, the transfer of that speed out in the bottom part of the swing. And that will help your wrist angles to really line up nicely through impact. You don't want to be holding on to any wrist angles. The wrist angles here are a byproduct of good body motion. If I keep my pelvis quiet in the downswing, I don't fire it too quickly, and I keep my weight on the front as I've prescribed from this front view. Remember, there's no sway, the weight staying on the front leg the whole time. Turn around, fire the grip end and get the speed at the bottom. That's the start point for this exercise. Do it without a ball, just with the grip end of the club, and then take that exercise to the range and stand there with balls, keeping the foot back and swinging and releasing the club head fully. Once you've done a few of these, you'll actually find that the momentum of the swing will pull you into more of a finish. And if you're worried about not making a full finish, I'd tell you not to worry, because that rotation and that momentum will ultimately get you there. You don't need to think about finishing the golf swing all the way up and around here. You actually want to think about the golf swing finishing much sooner, much quicker than it currently does, and getting all of that energy out at the bottom. The modifications I've suggested today are really applicable to all golfers, but particularly useful if you're a senior golfer who's finding that you've lost some speed and, as I say, some flexibility or mobility in your body. These drills are applicable to all golfers. You could take this to the driving range next time you practice. You'd be able to incorporate those setup modifications immediately. I would expect you to see immediate benefits from changing your setup and increasing that range of motion in the backswing. If you'd like to learn more about hack motion wrist sensor drills and how to train your wrist angles for better golf, then you can click on the link that's in the description of this video, which will take you to further video training.